You're listening to the Good Food CFO podcast, where we challenge the status quo of the food industry, celebrate good food founders who are building businesses on their own terms, introduce industry disruptors, and are redefining equitability. If you're ready to build your financial confidence and join the good food revolution to change the way the food industry does business, you are in the right place. I'm the Good Food CFO and your host, Sarah Delavan. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Tyler Dawley, a guy who has lived in one spot his entire life. That spot is Big Bluff Ranch. Since he was a kid driving the ranch truck, looking through the steering wheel, he has found purpose and passion working with the land and animals. Since 2000, Tyler has been driving innovations on the ranch, implementing everything from farmers markets to grass-fed beef to pasture poultry to direct marketing. Currently, Big Bluff Ranch is one of the largest producers of organic, pasture-raised, no corn, no soy chicken on the West Coast. Tyler is joining me to discuss all that he has learned about running a commercial ranch over the years and how he envisions the future. He tells me the story of the ranch and how they got to chickens. We talk about the true cost of food and how he got comfortable at a relatively high price point. And with legacy on his mind, Tyler shares how he plans to innovate to ensure the Big Bluff Ranch is around for future generations. Let's get to it. Tyler, welcome to the podcast.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
My pleasure. Yeah. I think you're the first rancher that we've had on the podcast. So I'm really excited to chat with you.
We're only like 1% of the population or some vanishingly small fraction. So, yeah, odds are against you talking to people like me.
That's fascinating. I never heard a statistic about the percentage of the population that is farmers.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I'm going to get them wrong. So don't take these as fact, but basically I'm right that like the turn of the 1900s, there was like 35% of the population was directly involved in agriculture, actually getting their hands dirty. And up to about now it's down sub 1%, I believe, that actually get their hands dirty. That the whole ag industry is still less than 2%, 3% of jobs out there.
Wow.
And that's including, people who make, food, there's just not many people who actually get their hands dirty anymore.
Well, that's fascinating. And it leads me to what I think is an obvious question. How did Big Bluff Ranch start? And maybe what were you doing before, if anything? Maybe you grew up on a farm.
I was doing nothing. I was born and raised. I am actually sitting in my sister's childhood bedroom. That is now my office, as long as she is not visiting, in which case I get kicked out for grandkids. My room's across the hall. Holly, my wife, and I live in the original ranch house that was probably built in the 1910s, something like that. A literal stone's throw away from where I grew up here. Yeah, I've never done anything else. It's kind of a weird thing. I've had 2 zip codes in my entire life.
Wow.
3 addresses.
From what I've learned about Big Bluff Ranch so far is your main product is chickens. Mm-hmm. Has that always been the case, or has the farm gone through an evolution?
Oh, total evolution. So Grandpa, my mom's dad, bought the ranch in 1960. And at the time, for him, it was more of a hobby ranch, which kind of has fundamentally shaped how we've had to manage our ranch ever since, in the fact that we are about half the size that we would need to be to kind of operate on a conventional scale.
Okay.
And just to blow people's minds, that means our ranch is about 4,000 acres. But really, we'd want to be 8,000 to 10,000 acres to be able to just be a conventional style operation. So at the beginning, it didn't really matter because Grandpa was just doing this for fun. He had a very successful off-farm job in the Bay Area in the building boom after World War II. And the ranch was only meant to be his hobby was trying to avoid taxes. So the ranch really was a tax avoidance situation. And then in the 80s, because what the ranch was, it was where my mom and her siblings would come up for the summer. This was the family getaway. And they, when grandpa started to mutter about, oh, I need to pull my capital out, get my equity, make it more liquid, whatever he was saying. I wasn't around then, but they basically said, no, we don't want you to sell the ranch. And so what it ended up doing is he passed it on to them, got it out of his estate into their name. But then he also said, it's not mine. I'm not writing checks anymore. And so this, through a series of side stories, had my mom and dad here managing the ranch. And all of a sudden, being relatively city people, they're like, holy moly, how do we make a living on a ranch that really was never bought to be a commercial operation? So my dad ran into a guy named Alan Savory, who was somewhat famous in some circles, who started something called holistic management, which is now he's got a TED Talk. It's had multiple millions of views. And he was from Rhodesia back in the day. And he did a whole bunch of amazing stuff. But ultimately, the thing that lots of people glom onto is that he kind of said, hey, wait a second. The way nature works is that you have grazing animals clumped together by predators and they move often, that they're always going on to fresh grass and that the grazed grass has a long time to recover. Many other things are part of holistic management, but that was kind of one of the key elements. And my dad went to a lecture in a town smaller than Red Bluff. There was like 10 or 15 people. This was in the early 80s. Alan Savory was just a wacky guy, funny accent. No one knew him. So it was my dad and 10, 15 other people meeting Alan Savory, who is now somewhat famous. And that led my dad here on the ranch to moving cows, building fence, essentially ranching in nature's image. Just like I kind of said that grazing animals should be in herds. They should be concentrated in one area for a relatively short time, moved on, and that one spot should have a long time to recover. By doing that, you actually are encouraging more plants to grow, which means you can actually raise more animals. And it's just a function of the way an animal, including us, would like to eat, that we live in what they call a Mediterranean climate. So we have cool, wet winters and hot, dry summers. Now, native perennials are these amazing plants that are green year round. So just imagine that you're a cow, you have this dry hay, which is good, or you have this nice little green plant. You're like, oh, I'm gonna eat that green plant. So what these cows do is they're not dumb. They're going to eat the green plant. Then they're going to hunt every single green perennial on the ranch and just eat that. And they're going to come back and that perennial will have had a week to push up just a little bit more of its solar panels, its leaves. And the cows are coming back great, mouthful, chomp. And that overgrazing like that is what kills perennials. So that scenario happens when you have cows spread over the entire ranch with either no predator pressure or no fence control. So we don't have predators here anymore, so we have to use fences. So we move them into an area and say, okay, you got to eat everything here. You have to eat both your ice cream, which is your native perennial, but you also have to eat your steak and potatoes, which is that dry stuff.
Yeah.
And so you take all of that biomass and you either turn it into a cow, or the cow turns it into fertilizer, otherwise known as cow poop. And then also all the stuff they don't eat, they trample down and lay it on the ground, and that turns into food for the soil microbes. And that does all sorts of amazing things. And eventually, if I were to skip to the end of the long story, which is already kind of long, that soil microbes makes happy soil grows more plants feeds more cows makes more happy plants. Massively amazing synergistic positive feedback loop. So that was what my dad did in the 80s and 90s, was range management cows and just selling the cows, cow calf operation, selling them commercially to the auction yard, not making much money, being very much a least cost producer. In the 2000s, right around 2000, when I graduated college, there was the beginning of the grass-fed beef movement, which was the beginning of the niche meat direct marketing. So we did that. through the 2000s with our grass-fed beef, we meandered into other things like grass-fed lamb, grass-fed goat, all delicious things, but not many people eat them. We weren't actually all that good at direct marketing. We didn't know what we didn't know. We tried a little bit of chicken at the time, and we're like, oh, that was not a fun experience. New rule for the ranch, 4 legs only. And the only 4-legged animal left was pasture pork. So we did pork, and we realized, oh, there is something worse than chicken, and it's raising pigs for us. So when we kind of popped back out of the pig experiment, we looked around and realized that the only thing that other people were not producing was chicken. No one else was doing chicken. So we got into chicken. First, we were direct marketing. Then I met a guy who could sell more than he could raise, and we could raise more than we could sell. And then we switched over to basically being some version of a wholesaler, contract grower, white label operation. I haven't really figured out what to call us, but we grew for someone else. They put their label on it, and they got to deal with the customer problems. And that was great. That allowed us to expand. We can now produce up to 72,000 pasture-raised chickens a year, which is a lot of pasture chicken, but not very much chicken if you're, Foster Farms or Tyson's. And then COVID happened, things went topsy-turvy, and now we are kind of moving back into the direct marketing, trying to go through digital marketing, e-commerce, shipping, so we don't have to actually go to farmers markets, which are all far away from us here in the middle of nowhere.
Okay. That's amazing. So we've not met before today's recording. So I'll just share a little bit of my background in food. Involved spending a lot of time on chicken farms like you're describing,
Right.
where, there are some cows, there are some lamb, there's some pig, the chickens are everybody's kind of circling around in, a very well-timed pattern, if you will. My job for a long time was sourcing chicken like yours for what was one of the sort of top catering companies in LA. So what we were trying to do was put more money into the farmer's hands by buying direct and serving a lot of food to a lot of people through catering. Before that, I owned what I hoped would have been a retail store, but it never made it to, luckily, it never made it to brick and mortar, but we were a pop-up for a while. So same idea, like our mission was, we want good food to reach more people. And going through the grocery store kind of makes no sense because some of the most delicious things are fragile, right? It doesn't work in that conventional supply chain. And so we were trying to go again, direct to farm, farm to table, when we wanted to be the connection. And for years I thought, this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to fulfill the mission of kind of helping to move the good food movement forward, is I'm going to be the conduit between. Instead, I found myself in a position where now I am not actively moving food and physically getting it from one place to the other, but supporting brands in figuring out the money part so that they can maintain their businesses, grow their businesses, and do whatever they need to build a business on their terms, right? Where they're actually making money, they could pay their team a living wage, and slowly but surely we change how this industry does business so that more food like what you're producing can have a whatever path, to people that makes it the most accessible. So I'm a bit familiar with some of the farming practices that you're talking about. And it's one of the reasons that I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, is because we talk to a lot of CPG brand founders, right? They're making a product. A lot of them buy direct from farmers whenever they can. They're trying to do things really sustainably, but it's very interesting for me, and I think our audience as well. You are raising chickens, and previously you're selling them sort of white label, right? So you raise them, you sell them to another company, another ranch or farm, and they're selling them to the end consumer. I want to dive into that a little bit just because I'm curious from a financial perspective. Obviously, you're not selling it at full retail. Was that a financially beneficial relationship for you guys, or did you see that maybe you were going to have to change direction at some point?
Our margins were pretty minimal. I don't know off the top of my head. It's one of those things where if I don't look, I don't have to know.
Sure. Yep.
Which is not a great way to run a business, but sometimes you have to be able to sleep at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we always knew that it was tough to be just a white label operation like that, that the farther you get away from actually having your hands dirty, the more money you actually make at this sort of thing.
Yeah.
I've been having this conversation with some other people. It's probably a little bit grandiose to say I'm mentoring them, but I'm got a couple more years under my belt than they do. And I'm like, look, you are killing it on this direct marketing stuff. You're doing way better than I am. This is where your money is, because they kept trying to go back and be like, well, I just want to raise the animals. That's what I love to do. And I'm like, I know, I get it. I totally get it. But the reality is you don't make money raising an animal. There's a somewhat famous guy in our neck of the industry, and he has a saying where if you want to be a cowboy, get a job. So the idea is if you like taking care of cows, if you like fixing fence, don't run a business, don't buy a ranch, don't buy land, don't buy animals, go work for someone else, because really you want a job. You don't want a business. So when we were doing the white labeling thing, we only had one main contract that was super uncomfortable. It wasn't very profitable. It wasn't very, we were really having to kind of make other things happen at the time. But on the other hand, what we raise is such a specialty product that it is very tough to find other customers. So we were kind of just stuck there. And, COVID was both very good for us initially, and then kind of turned out to be kind of very bad. Like everyone else, it was kind of topsy-turvy.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of led us back into this direct to consumer idea, because we get to control, well, this as well, that the person who talks to the customer, who is the last person to interact with the customer, really owns that relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're white labeling, technically our customer is the white label company who's buying from us. And then, sometimes they sell it to other middlemen, sometimes they sell it to customers, and we don't have any ownership in that relationship. And so, we've been trying to become closer and closer to the customer over the past few years. And that ultimately the best way to do that is to be the retailer, that buy straight from the farm, talk to someone. I have chicken cow crap on my boots. We were just moving cows this morning. Right. Yeah. So that the type of relationship that we're trying to go to, and really let the people know, like just buy from us direct.
One of the things that people say in food is like, they're going to go where the volume is.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to sell more. So yes, we're going to sell it at a lower price, but we're going to sell more. And I challenge that sometimes. I challenge people to do the math, right? How many units do you have to sell? And then work backwards. Who are you going to sell them to, right? Like just figure out, okay, what does this model really look like? And some people still take that approach, and other people say, you know what, I want to sell fewer. I'm okay with that. I want to have a direct relationship, and I want to make more on the sale of every unit of my product. Did you struggle with that at all? Like, well, we're going to be potentially selling less chickens. Was that something that you spent time thinking about, or did you run the numbers?
Yeah. I mean, even though I didn't know my margin from our old wholesale business, I am a lover of spreadsheets. So I definitely ran the numbers. So as far as like the trade-off between volume and margin, that in our particular situation, the wholesale prices I can get versus the retail prices I can get, that we can, if we sell 50,000 birds a year wholesale, we make as much profit as if we sold about 20,000 birds direct.
Right.
So basically we can sell half the birds if we can go direct, and make the same amount of money as if we go wholesale. So direct is a lot more profitable. But as you know, that there's also a lot more hand holding. That on the wholesale side, I have, one phone call, I can sell 20,000 birds in a year.
Yeah.
If I want to sell 20,000 birds to people, I'm probably talking to 5,000 people. I don't know, whatever the number is. So there's all these trade-offs, but to get to your point as to running the ultimate numbers, that I know that our reasonable cap on production is about 72,000 birds a year. And so I can plug in my best wholesale price ever. And I'm like, yeah, it's better than zero, but it's not amazing,
Right.
Whereas if I were to do 72,000 birds a year direct to consumer, which is a big stretch, but if I could do that, that number's amazing. I'm going to be on the beach sipping my pina colada, people. I'm out of here. Not really, because this is what I do. I mean, this is what I do. I wouldn't go to, who wants to sit on a beach anyways? I do not understand that vacation dream. But so the direct to consumer is where a lot of margin's at, and you just have to realize there's going to be a lot more fuss involved with that avenue.
Yeah. What we typically find is that, people aren't just selling in one channel, right? They're in two, or they're even in three in some cases, and knowing your preferences, right? Yet we're going to move 20K in wholesale because we have this relationship and we're going to keep it. And then that leaves 52,000 chickens to sell retail. And that's going to get us to a nice sweet spot. And we believe that that's, doable, whatever it might be. I just like having this conversation, just, you know what I mean? To give examples for people,
right. Exactly. I mean, for our chickens, ultimately, I think I'd like to be about 50% wholesale of some version or other and 50% retail.
Mm-hmm.
I think that gives us the kind of the benefit of both worlds, where, one of those just dies to zero for no particular reason. The other one will keep us in business.
Yeah.
The other thing that we have the opportunity to do is that we can, once we own a relationship with a customer, that we have the ability to grow other proteins for them. That, yes, we're doing chicken right now because we've gotten really good at it, but really we're only using a small portion of the ranch right now for the chicken production.
Okay.
We still have thousands of other acres that we can do some beef on, but really our ranch, California really should grow lots of sheep and goats. We are a Mediterranean climate, like I said, lots of technical reasons for it, but basically goats and sheep should be raised here in vast numbers. It's going to fit our environment. It's going to reduce all the wildfires we're dealing with. It's going to this, it's going to that. Plus it's delicious. So kind of the ultimate vision is what we're doing here is that we want to raise the right animals for the right reasons and sell them to the right people, just to keep the alliteration going.
Yeah.
And in that case, it means a lot of goats and sheep because we have steep hillsides, we have a lot of brush. We're perfect for that. And so the idea is that right now our go-to-market product, if I can sound silly, is our chicken, but that our roadmap for development is to grow these other proteins for these same people, and that ultimately we become an example of a regenerative ranch that matches the environment. If you're in California, my other soapbox I can get on, but if you're in California, you should not be growing a lot of grass-fed beef. Whole bunch of reasons, mostly related around water. But goats and sheep don't need irrigated pasture to finish. They just need brush, and we got that everywhere in California.
Yeah.
So the idea is that ultimately we want to find 1,000, 1,500 families that think that our wackiness is rational, which it is, but it is wacky. And then just give them the most amazing meat possible and be an example for other people, and hope that other regenerative ranches kind of see like, oh, hey, they're doing pretty good at this. We should try that, and kind of lead by example and get this is the wave of the future. Like current agricultural practices cannot continue, that there are going to be massive changes in the agricultural industry over the next 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, just for instance, the fact that the average age of the farmer is 65, 68, there's going to be a huge generational transfer happening here because the old farmers couldn't financially stop. That's why they're still farming. So they're basically going to farm until they die because they have to. And then they die. And then all of a sudden it's like, who's going to farm after them? Right. And the no smart younger generation is going to look at grandpa or dad who's farming until he's 80 and not making any money and want to do it that way.
Yep.
If I am going to farm, I'm going to do it a different way. And that different way is, I don't see how you can avoid it, some version of regenerative, organic, sustainable, all of these various buzzwords, but essentially working in Mother Nature's image, taking what she gives us and then understanding the reasoning and then applying some active management to it.
It makes me so happy to hear this. I'm smiling because I was just having this memory. I don't remember how old I was, but it was Christmas Eve dinner and we're at my grandparents' house and, there's a lot of people. So there's multiple different tables. And I was seated with my uncle, who I've never agreed on, I don't think, more than 5 things with. And I was my mom told me to quiet my voice because I was having a very loud argument with him that regional eating was possible, that we could, grow food regionally and eat that food. And, there were however many benefits to it. And I was just so loud because I felt so right about it. And, I got shushed and that sucked. But the coolest thing about being in the role that I'm in now as a part of this amazing community of farmers and producers and retailers is that I'm seeing what I always, as a young adult to now, always believed was possible. There's people like you who are like, we're doing it. I've never heard anyone say what you just shared about sheep and goat. And I think that's fascinating. And I'm instantly inspired. I eat sheep. I don't have a lot of goat. I think I only ate it once, but I'm inspired to consume more of that locally because that's my way of voting and being a part of the movement. So thank you for sharing that, just as like a kind of a big but side note.
I think it was Joel Salatin, although he may have stolen it from someone, who basically says you get to vote for the future you want to live in 3 times a day. That so many people don't feel that they are powerless to affect either the big ag companies or the climate change. That's like, it's this big, massive thing. It's going to take government, or I can't do anything about it. But and just like you said, that you choosing to buy a certain style of food, it doesn't have to be every day, it doesn't have to be, the absolute best, but, even though we do a lot of pasture chicken, it does not take many people to keep us in business, right? That if, one of your listeners just buys a chicken from us, like that is noticeable, right? And what we are luckily enough able to steward about 4,000 acres. We're sequestering more carbon, we're absorbing more rainfall, we're increasing native perennial native diversity. We have a neotropical migrant pathway with our riparian jungle, all this amazing stuff. And this is all supported because you are buying awesome chicken from us that tastes really good. I mean, it's kind of a win-win-win situation. And so it's one of the things I do get on a soapbox about is that, yes, buying your food, if you are a single individual consumer and you only buy 1 chicken or 1 lamb chop, or, you go to I don't know, it's meaningful, it matters. And that these changes happen. That Epic Bars, a number of years ago, started off as a small CPG brand. I don't know them that closely, but then they got pretty good distribution. They hit a moment and they kind of took off like wildfire. And then General Mills bought them. This is a while ago now, 5, 6, 7 years. I don't know. I'm getting old. It all feels like yesterday. And so a lot of people like freaking out, like, oh, General Mills just bought the competition. They wanted to shut them down, but it's the opposite way around. General Mills sees the demand from consumers like you and me, and they don't know how to get in front of that. Like, we can't do that internally. The only way we can innovate is to buy in these young, innovative brands, absorb their DNA, and that's how we're going to stay ahead. And so anytime I see, I mean, some of it is bad, don't get me wrong, but most of the time when I see these big corporate purchases of small, groovy brands, I'm like, that's awesome. These big brands are trying to get ahead of the curve. Change is happening. You just don't really notice it.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So yeah, I've got a mix. That's like such a long conversation that maybe we can dig into later. I don't know, but like
part two, I hear a part two already.
Yeah. And what I'll say about that is that I agree with you that the reason that someone like General Mills is buying someone like Epic is because they're like, well, this already exists. We see the trends. We see where the money is going. We can't compete with that on our own, right? All the infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to buy them. Some people would say, well, Epic sold out. You know what? They worked hard. They wanted to make the money. Like, I'm not going to fault them for that, right? They did their work. My hope is that General Mills would continue to source the same quality ingredients, that they would pay their people well, that they're not getting, right? There's like some inherent shitty things that happen within companies like General Mills. And so I'm optimistic that things go the right way. Yeah, long conversation, but it is a good sign,
right,
that a company like General Mills would buy Epic. It is a good sign, that insert any corporate name wants to buy insert independently owned business that's doing good, right? Because that means things are moving in the right direction.
Directionally is important. That yes, the things are going to get watered down. Some greenwashing is going to happen, but directionally, things are going the right way, right? Just the fact that these brands decided that they needed to change, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's very hopeful. So I'm a big proponent of, hey, let's just do the best thing we can. It's not going to be perfect. Let's just do the best thing we can and keep going from there.
Yeah. Getting back to Big Bluff Ranch. So you're like what, a year or more into selling direct?
Yeah, we're about a year. I mean, we never really stopped. We just slowed way back down. I'd say we're about a year into me sort of semi-actively trying to do it.
Okay.
I do. Yeah. It is intellectually clear to me how to do it, but the actual doing of it is a lot harder than, it's like, oh, get a big email list and develop a relationship and send out nurture emails. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds totally simple. And then you're like, oh yeah, no, yeah, nope, that didn't, nope. Oh yeah, keep working on that idea. Yep, nope, keep going. It'll work.
There's a lot of consistency, reworking, and key performance indicator charts. Right. They're like your new best friend. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and this is something we have talked about several times on the podcast, and this is like this could be a deeper conversation too, for part two of our conversation, but your chickens are many dollars more expensive than even an organic chicken that you would find at Whole Foods / Amazon now and insert other, sort of regional store. And I'm a huge proponent of charging the real price for your product. I've talked separately about, even though there is so much what I call corporate greed in conventional retail, there's still an artificially low price point to a lot of the products that are sold on the shelf, right? Because of the inherent inequitability in our food system and supply chain. So there's two things happening here, right? Like, yes, corporate greed is real. The price of everything has gone up astronomically on the shelf, and it has been for years. But we'll use chicken as an example. It's still artificially priced on the shelf. Though both of those things are true. And then you've got your product as an example that is, I'm just going to say, much more expensive, right? And because I'm going to assume you're charging the actual price, right? You're basing your price on what it costs to raise a chicken in the way that you are. And so that's my my thoughts on pricing. And then I feel like it was necessary to say that. But my question for you is, when it came to pricing your product for direct to consumer sales, was it easy for you to sort of do that math and go, this is what it's at? Did you struggle with that? And how has it been received by the consumer?
You're absolutely right. You probably gave a more coherent answer than I normally do, but just to kind of highlight a couple things, that the chicken you see on your grocery store shelf, the majority of a chicken's diet is corn and soy, which is heavily subsidized through the farm bill.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not actually having to pay their full price. You know, they basically make money no matter what they do. They're encouraged to overproduce, which drives the price down. There's no real cost to them for all of the topsoil washing down the Mississippi. So right. The chicken, just like you said, the chicken you see on your grocery store shelf is artificially low, both from a legislative aspect, you know, an economic incentive type perspective, and also kind of from the human perspective, that they are coming out of this contract system where it's heavily skewed in the corporate benefit, that the farmers of the chicken you're eating are making pennies, just absolute pennies. So when you buy a conventional chicken, not to fearmonger too much, but you're supporting poor environmental practices, you're supporting stupid legislative agendas, and you're pretty much putting your chicken farmer into serfdom. So when you buy that cheap chicken, it is 100% artificial. And if you really knew more about the system, you would be kind of horrified at what you're supporting when you buy that stuff.
Yeah. I also want to interject though, just a moment, and say that chicken for many people is all that they can afford. And they don't have the ability to buy a chicken like yours. And we're not trying to shame anyone in regard to what they purchase. Yeah. Just making that clear for our audience, like they know where we're coming from.
I may have gotten too extreme there. Yes, it is better to buy the chicken than not buy the chicken, but just that, you know. So when we priced our product, I mean, even now, like it's I go back to my favorite spreadsheet. I'm like, this can't be right. I must have had a typo somewhere, an extra 10, it's like, no, that's just pretty much how much it costs to raise chicken like us with a reasonable level of profit to keep us as a sustainable business, you know, stewarding the land in the care, you know, for all of us, right? I mean, we are caretakers for not just us, but for the entire community.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point to just like touch on. A lot of times when someone looks at the price, like from a consumer perspective, they think it's a chicken. It's almond butter, or it's nuts or whatever, right? But the way that it's being done and the way that your business is run, the effects that your farm and your business have on the environment, if we're talking about yours specifically, the value of that goes well beyond the taste of the chicken and the fact that it's feeding you and your family. So if you're able and you are spending money on a chicken like yours or a similar chicken, or I just ate some cashews and walnuts and things that have a really good supply chain, and there's a workforce of all abilities that are hired to create that product, I'm paying $13 or $14 or whatever it is for that nut, because I believe in all the things that it's doing. I'm not just paying that for the nut. Right. And I just think that if we think about that as food business founders, as farmers and ranchers, that like remind ourselves of that, it's powerful. So I wanted to take a moment and just go, yes, that's an important thing for people in the good food industry to remember, and to echo.
Yeah. And that is how we go about trying to sucker people into buying our expensive chicken. we try to remove ourselves from the commoditization of our chicken as much as possible. Yes, ultimately you are receiving a chicken from us, but that we talk as much about, our perennial grasses, our, water infiltration rates, living wage to our employees, all of that sort of stuff, that there's a whole bundle of stuff you're getting with our chicken, that ultimately what I am truly selling you is some version of hope that the future will be better than it is now, hope that good agricultural practices moderate our climate change, hope that good agricultural practices will heal your body, make your food taste better, make your kids want to sit down and have dinner with you because chicken actually tastes good like it's supposed to, right? So, and I'm not saying I'm super great at it, but this is what I'm trying to go to, that when you're buying chicken from us, like you said, you are buying a whole set of values, a whole set of practices that is kind of shows up in the form of a chicken, but it is so much more than a chicken. And to some degree, it's hard to do that because so much of what we could do, we could be doing so much more as far as environmental restoration stuff, but there's no way to charge money for it. Like I have this one idea. So what happens is when it rains, your rain's going to hit your rangeland. It's going to kind of sheet sideways, hit a little draw and shoot down. And you'll kind of see this and not really think about it, but you see that the water in those little draws going down to your creeks, they're kind of brown. Well, if you put what they call a trash dam across those little draws, all of that kind of dirty water is actually soil, and it's literally the topsoil, which is where all your fertility is, right? So you put these little trash dams, like a little, like if you're a kid and you make a little rock dam, or you can get some brush and you lay it across, and all of a sudden you have a little bit of impediment to that water flow, and you slow down that water, it drops all of that topsoil. Now all of a sudden you've both kept that out of your rivers and the delta and all that sort of stuff. You now have a fertile bunch of soil that you can grow stuff in. It's amazing what you can do, because then eventually you'll start getting willows and cottonwoods growing in here, and that these sort of plants start indicating that you have a very vibrant water cycle. But there's no way I can price that into our chicken. I mean, so I do have this idea. People are buying carbon credits, right? You get on an airplane and you're flying somewhere, you can offset your carbon. And these carbon projects are great, but it's like cooking stoves in Africa. That's great. But are you ever going to see that cooking stove in Africa? Whereas if you were to sign up for the Big Bluff Ranch Eco Club, which doesn't exist except in my head, you pay $20 a month, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And you are just saying, hey, you're an amazing land steward. Go off and do all this amazing stuff because I know you're sequestering carbon. You live in the Bay Area. You're 4 hours away. You can drive up here once a year. We'll have an open ranch. Look, your money helped us do this non-economically viable project to save our life.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't know. It's a cool idea. I don't know if I could quite pull it off. Like Patreon for farmers.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of harkens back to, I'm going to bring it back to like a non-farmer example. It's like, we want to do good and we're trying to do it through our business. And sometimes we try to do so much good that it's like, I've had lots of I was told this, other founders have been told this by others, is like, well, you're running a charity, right? Like you're not taking any money for yourself because you're giving it, or you're spending it, right, in ways that are meaningful, but not, in our capitalist society, like they don't make sense, right? And that's a frustrating thing, and I actually think it's quite a great idea to have a membership like that, especially if it's regional. I think if you're doing it in the, within a certain radius of where I live, then all the better. It's really interesting. So you're not able to build the cost of everything you want to do and could do on the ranch into the price of the chicken, and you're probably not. You're probably just doing feed and labor and land maintenance and, and margin. So you're probably just the basics, the
Right.
essentials are in the
Yep.
cost. And it's just, I was just kind of presenting a way to think about paying more for a chicken helps our planet, and does a lot more just by the way that you are doing the farming, which I think is really, really cool. But this idea of there's so much more we could do, but that's not a thing that people will pay for in the form of a chicken is really interesting. And I'm also thinking about it in the sense of like, and this might not relate exactly, but restaurants here in LA, they'll add like the medical insurance fee, a percentage of the bill or whatever on at the end. And it's like a lot of them are open about it. Like we're tacking this on. And some people have said like we're not putting it into the cost of our menu because then people won't come here. Like our food looks too expensive, right? But it like the idea is the same for me because people should have medical benefits and a business, we would hope that all businesses have the ability to make enough money to pay their people well and offer them insurances like that. And the reality is that restaurants in LA don't. And so we're trying to be transparent and we're popping it on the bottom of the receipt. What a world it would be if people could afford to pay the real price for things, have the benefits they need. Like this is like a utopia, right? That we're thinking of. And just our conversation is just making me realize how far we are from that, but it's not worth giving. It's worth pursuing.
Sure.
In the way that I'm pursuing it, in the way that you're pursuing it, in the way that every company who listens to this podcast is pursuing it. Mm-hmm. But it feels like a big battle.
Right.
I'm here for it.
It is a big battle, but it's happening. Go back, Epic Bars did it, there's so many more brands. I'm going to space on 99.9999% of them all, but people are doing, I just heard a podcast about Kevin's preferred, is a little CPG prepared paleo meal kit. It's like, there's tons of people doing it right now. It's a surprising number. It is happening. So yes, we are not living in utopia. There are some massive like inequalities in our system, but people are making change. Change is happening.
Yeah.
And I try and be buoyed by that, those little signs of hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's still a long, long ways to go, but compared to like 2000, grass-fed beef was still such a outlandish concept, like selling meat at a farmer's market where they used to buy veggies, their $20 bill would buy all the veggies for a week. And they come and buy a steak for $20. They're like, I'm not doing that. I'm not taking meat home. They didn't understand it. And now like grass-fed beef is everywhere. That there is a true change. Now, you can certainly argue that some of that grass-fed beef is not as good as it should be, but whatever. It's in the grocery store. It is a directionally better meat that you can buy. And, these things are happening all over the place. It's really cool.
Yeah. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that every individual effort is right. When you zoom out, that's a wave. That's a big wave. Right. Of change that is happening and that has been happening. The way that I look at things sort of like this good food movement that we talk about, like this has been happening for decades now. And what I view as part of the problem is the huge barrier to entry to get into traditional or conventional retail stores, right? That the big cost right now of reaching the consumer through the internet, which sounds so funny to say out loud, right? But like algorithms and pay to play and all of these things, it takes a lot of money. And I think for me, I really recognize that as the major issue about it, like a couple months ago, back in the summer. And it's literally become my focus is to go, how do we change this game how do we push back and go, nope, like these margins that you're getting from General Mills, you're not going to get them from me. Here's why. But the people want our product. So let's sit down at the table and have a conversation about how if we do this with the numbers that we need as a brand, we're both going to win. We're both going to benefit. Right. And I think you're doing that in your business as well. And finding the right audience is part of that puzzle. Right. And I think you actually do an amazing job. If you haven't checked out the Big Bluff Ranch website, when Chelsea, our podcast producer, was looking it over, she messaged me. She was like, look at this guy's website. It is amazing. Like, you are really speaking to a very specific person who has a set of values and the money to support what you're doing. And it was just very clear on who you are, what the ranch stands for, and what you're doing, which I thought was really, really powerful. And that I hope other brands listening will check that out and have the confidence to do for their brands as well. I thought it was really great.
Wow. I'm blushing over here. Yeah. So, I mean, all the gurus who talk about direct marketing, you got to have your avatar, with an avatar with a very distinct issue that only you can solve. And so what we have up on the site now is kind of aimed at, I call them like eco foodies, someone who wants really good food, but also wants their really good food to do really good things, which is great. And I love them. I mean, that's to some degree, it's probably what I am. Someday I'll have the money to be a foodie, but I would be there. I'm there in spirit.
Yeah.
What I'm planning to do is I'm so thinking through avatars that we know that we grow an amazing chicken. Anyone who ever has it, I've had one person, the worst comment I had was like, not that much better. I was like, it's still better, right? Even though it's not better, it's better. Our chicken is transformative. It can be transformative for the right person. And so I've been messing around in my head, like talking to myself, not too loud. Only the cows hear it and the chickens hear it. But who can we take this chicken and present it to that it's actually going to be transformative in their life? And and it's not on the website yet. If you go and look anytime soon, it's going to be pretty much the way we just talked about it. But I'm going to set up a special offer for what I'm calling an ethical eater. And so in my mind, an ethical eater is someone who has made a conscious decision to probably not eat meat, like think vegetarian or vegan, because they said, hey, I have a set of ethics that say I don't want animals to suffer for me. I want my environment to be better, whatever. And I'm 100% behind that. If you have made a conscious choice about the food you eat, awesome, fantastic, really, truly fantastic. There are a percentage of people who've made these ethical choices who are like, I really believe in this, but my body just doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
And so they're like, now I'm in this ethical conundrum where I don't believe in eating conventional meat, but my body probably needs meat. So that's kind of what I'm going to try and set up an offer around, is like, hey, don't think of yourself as a vegetarian. Think of yourself as an ethical eater. And you have these criteria, animals have to be treated well, environment has to be treated well. And then I'm going to show like, hey, yeah, conventional meat, don't eat that stuff. Our meat, absolutely, you can totally eat it. And that for these people, we will be that transformative experience. Like, you can still be a vegetarian and eat our chicken, because we have that level of attributes. We're organic, we're pasture raised, we're no soy, we're family farm, a lot of this, a lot of that. And on top of all of that, it's delicious.
Yeah. I have a good friend who, that was maybe 5 or more years ago now. She's vegetarian from the day I met her, long before. And she was struggling at a certain, time frame in her life. And she was seeing some different medical and alternative sort of health professionals, and forget whom it was that said it. She was like, I know you don't want to do this, but I'm recommending that you get some animal protein in into your system. You don't have to eat it every day, but it is going to help you feel better. And she struggled with it. And at the time I had my pop-up. And so we were doing, really great pork, really great chicken, and we had wild caught seafood. She was like, I can't go to the grocery store and buy this. Like, I know that it will not pass my lips. I gotta get over this mental hurdle first. This food has to align with how I think about and the environment and animal welfare and all of these things. And I was like, I got you. We're going to start out with chicken. It's like, for whatever reason, it's easier for a lot of people, I think, than other meats. And that was sort of I don't want to call it a gateway, because she still holds those same standards, and she's majority vegetarian. She has meat in her life, and she is choosing exactly as you described. I myself don't do well on a vegetarian diet. There's a lot of things that, I don't do well. So I'm a proud meat eater, but I also choose, I think for me, chickens that eat soy, the drugs that are used, even though they're antibiotic free, in some of the conventional, they're harmful to me. Like, I see the effects almost like overnight if I eat a protein like that. So I have my own reasons for why I choose to eat the way that I eat as often as I can, and we all do. And I think having options is amazing. So I think it's cool that you're going to have that on your website. And I also think that recognizing that, like, there's a specific person or people who will want to buy my chicken is both smart from a business perspective, you know what I mean? And necessary, right, to succeed. And that's something I talk to my clients about a lot. I don't think they'll mind me sharing this, but there's a specific company whose original plan was selling in through grocery stores, and they're regional grocery stores that they were selling with. But compared to other products in the set, in the category, they were like twice the price, or they are twice the price. It's like, I don't think that your customer is it could be the same customer, right, that shops in that store and would buy your product elsewhere. But when they're in that store, they're not looking for your product. We need to get your product where your customer is, and is specifically looking for what you have to offer. And I think that that's a critical piece of the puzzle, specifically for businesses like we're talking about.
Yep. Yeah. So it is tough to be so specific, because I know there's so many people who would buy our chicken potentially. Then I always kind of go back. I only need 1,000 families. I don't know what the exact number is, but this is my mantra. I only need 1,000 families, right? I know that there are 1,000 people out there who have these ethical standards, who will want to remain vegetarian and eat just a little bit of chicken, just like your friend that you buy a whole chicken, you do a Sunday roast chicken, you have a good, awesome Sunday dinner. You're going to have 1 to 2 lunches of leftovers. So you're going to eat 3 chicken meals out of your 21 meals a week, right? And that's probably enough to kind of give your body what it needs. I should really figure out the math someday, but you're mostly vegetarian still. You're 18, 21, 21st vegetarian, right? And that the meat you do have really meets not your vegetarian standards, but if you step back to these ethical standards, and even if it's not for you, that's absolutely fine too. You have a husband, you have a wife, you have kids who want to eat some meat. You want it in the house, you want the best meat, right? Or maybe you've got your parents and they're getting older, or health issues or whatever, give them the gift of chicken soup, right? So for me, this feels like an avatar that I can provide a transformative experience, really, really change their life. And the nice thing about that, and I can even be blatant about it, is that, look, no one else's chicken is going to pass these ethical standards, right? You can't, if I can convince you to eat our chicken because we are these amazing chickens, which we are, nothing else meets our criteria, right? You can't stop eating from us and go buy grocery store chicken, right? That you become very sticky to us, right? It's either us or it's nothing. right? And I tend to think that if you start eating our chicken, you're going to prefer to eat our chicken rather than no chicken because it's that much better. But we will see.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I follow some CPG brands, and it boggles my mind a little bit how, I don't know, it's just such a different mindset where your whole thing is like trying to get into stores and then trying to get into distributors. And then I don't understand the margin thing, really. I'm like, how can they produce it so freaking cheap that all these other people can stick their fingers in the pie and it's still cheap enough that the consumer wants it?
You want to know a secret? They
Sure.
can't.
Okay.
They can't. That's something that I'm constantly trying to push back on is when the margins are what the margins are for the distributor and for the retailer, the brand is making the least amount of money, tiniest margin, tiniest dollar amount. Then it becomes a quote volume game, which is hard to win unless you have a lot of money coming in from the outside to keep it going. Right. So
that reminds me of this great farmer joke. How do you make a small fortune in farming? Start
farm
off with a big one.
Oh, yeah. No, but it's true, and bringing up that point, like that's a question that a lot of people have. And I think some people, I know that some people enter the industry with a belief of what the margins are. Like before people get inside, they're like, oh, well, I sell my food to the grocery store. They get 50% and I get 50%, right? They double the price. And that is not the reality. That's what consumers also believe, right? Consumers, because the industry is kept so closed off. It's so secretive, one of the things we were going through last summer as the stores were just raising prices astronomically is the negative taste in people's mouth when the product they're used to buying goes up $2 a unit on the shelf is this brand is gouging me, not this retailer is gouging me. I think now that narrative has changed, but when it was happening, it was like, what the heck, this brand, right? And then so, I don't speak directly to consumers, but whenever I have the chance, I do. And I let them know what the reality of the situation is, right? So they have a little bit more compassion for the brand, but they also understand you can go directly to the brand and buy it right at the price that they intend for you to purchase it at. It's complicated. It's a complicated, secretive industry.
Right. And then all those, CPG brands who are getting that small share, the farmers are getting even less of it. Just to stick up for my fellow farmers. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit of a catch-22, right? Because when you have a product in a store, you want to support the brand by shopping in the store, right? Because they need movement to stay there. But you also know, some of us also know that they're getting the smallest share. Just like if a farmer sells to someone else who then sells to the end consumer, the farmer is getting the smallest share. So those of us who have access to it, I'm lucky. We're in California, it's farmers markets all year round. So we have the option to go and give the full value of the product to the farmer. That feels great. Do we shop at grocery stores? Yes, because we need things in between farmers markets. But to be able to do that it just feels really good because we believe in what you all are doing and we want your food, the quality of food that you create to be available,
Right. Yeah, that's totally true. I would just throw out there, at least from a direct marketer who went to farmers markets, the thing with farmers markets is that it's such a low volume that actually farmers markets are not really actually, at least for the most part, farmer markets are not actually great venues for farmers to sell their stuff because they just don't sell enough of it. That there's only a small portion of the eco foodies, only a small portion of them are going to be able to make it to the farmers markets every weekend. Right. Yeah. And so there's a much larger buying population out there that don't go to farmers markets. So it's great for many things, but the farmers who only go to the farmers markets are kind of boxing themselves in. You can't really go wholesale because that's too big, and you can't really live at farmers markets because that's too small. It's a weird little path you have to navigate to get your volume up, but keep your margins also high enough at the same time.
Yeah.
So
the markets I've been privy to have a restaurant business, right? So, I mean, here in LA, it's like you've got your table sales and then you have your behind the table sales, and that's where the volume goes and the prices are a little bit lower, right?
mm-hmm.
But still, you can make money on what you're selling.
Right.
So there's that. And it was interesting. I had a couple of conversations here with Cat Fields White, who's runs several farmers markets in San Diego and puts on a big farmers market conference every year. And one of the things that I learned through their conference is, just like with anything else, you have to find the market that's right for your business, right? Like, is it in the community that has the money or the mindset to buy a $20 steak or a $20 chicken at the market, right? Or not, right? So where it is, who shops there, how many other chicken, ranchers do they have there? Like, being really critical about those things, and is important. And the thing we run into out here in LA a little bit is then this is kind of past, but there was this movement of like markets everywhere. And then there was like an oversaturation of markets, and that just didn't work out, and farmers couldn't be here like literally every week, you know what I mean? And so we saw a lot of the newer markets kind of fall off, but the long standing ones, I think they're long standing for a reason,
Right.
and but we have seen some farmers leave the markets too, so as with anything, business is complicated and different for everybody, right?
If only it were simple.
I know. It seems like it should be simpler, but
right.
Yeah.
Grow an
Then it wouldn't
amazing
be
chicken
fun.
and people buy it. That's all there is, right?
Yeah.
One,
Yeah.
two.
So do you have any sort of like a random question for you? Do you have any sort of like big lessons learned um in the financial realm of things from your business? I mean, I think it's really fascinating that you are farming a farm that was a hobby farm that then was, your dad's version of the farm, and now you've got your version of the farm. So I'm sure you've learned a lot from observing them. But anything within your time running the ranch that you think is important to share?
Well, just in case any of my parents decide to listen to this, I'm not in charge all by myself. I don't take all of the credit, even though I do. But no, they're like, he's upstairs paying bills right now. To some degree, it comes down to the fact that for us, we want to steward this land because it is, to some degree, it holds our heart, which is a little touchy-feely, but one of my visions for this ranch is that it becomes the emotional black hole, super heavy thing for all of our extended family. Like, my sisters grew up here. They live in Sacramento now, but they come up every vacation, right? So I've got nieces and nephews who are coming up all the time. And I want the ranch to still be here for them when it's time for them to bring their kids up here.
Yeah.
That is one of the different things about being in actual agriculture, is that just about any farmer you poke with a stick, probably this first or second thing they're going to say about the reason they do it is legacy, that they want it to be here for the kids. The story's changing a little bit, where now they're preserving for the option for their kids, because they know that the kids will make way more money if they go to the city. But that legacy is like the very first or second thing that they're going to say, that why they are farming. First it's going to be love of the land, then it's going to be, I'm doing it for my kids. And it's true. That's exactly what I'm doing. But in order to do that, to create that sort of legacy, that it's hard. Agriculture is not an easy business, that there is no margin in this. Look at our chicken prices. You think I'm making a ton of money? I guarantee I am not. That is, pretty much the bare minimum I can charge. Rather do nothing for nothing than something for nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the price. That's not exorbitant at all. And that, you just gotta, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but you got to play the numbers, right? I think generally speaking, unless you are huge and playing the commodity market where volume does pay off, and I don't think very many people get to play that game, you have to be playing on margin, not on volume. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we pretty much do, because we, like I said, we are half the size of what a commercial operation should be. So everything we do, we are trying to figure out how to get greater margin. A traditional cow-calf operation, which is what grandpa and my dad were doing until it kind of became infeasible, is you just raise a calf up to 6-7 months of age, wean it off, sell it to the auction yard, and off it goes to wherever. That is absolutely the lowest margin enterprise that you can do in the beef industry. And so we've been moving away from that ever since. So that's why you get into grass-fed beef, into direct marketing. That's why you get into pasture chicken, then you get into direct marketing pasture chicken. That's why we have a little lakeside cabin that we have people come up to, which is, that blows my mind. That's all margin. But we only have so many days at the lake that people can come, right? I mean, Airbnb empires have more than one house, right? Yeah. I'm talking my way into an answer here. I think the answer is, if I've learned anything, it's that play on margin, not on volume. Because I know that when we got into pasture poultry, when we were fully a white label operation, that was always my mantra. Like, I want this guy to buy more chicken, buy more chicken. The only way we're ever going to make more money is if he buys more chicken. And that just about, I lost the ranch on that, literally. So we now it's all about the margin game, and that if you don't get the margin, don't do it, because you don't have margin, you got nothing.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the most common tips or like lessons learned that people share on this podcast is, if you don't have the margin, don't do it. So I think that's a perfect place to stop. I think that's a great final message. Tyler, this has been such a fun conversation. I don't know how long the final episode will be, but we've been talking for over an hour. I could literally stay and talk to you all day, but you've, a ranch that you need to run and things that you need to do.
I can talk all day. I got time. I got another hour before I have to go pick up the kids.
Nice. Well, I think that we should continue the conversation. So I definitely want to do a part 2. Yeah. It's really fun, whether we do it here or we do it live, which I think would be pretty fun. Ooh. if you're up to it. I'll chat with Chelsea and see what we can get going. But where can people learn more about what you're doing on the ranch, and if they're interested in buying a chicken? I don't know how far you ship, but where can they learn more?
Go to bigbluffranch.com. We ship pretty much anywhere. It's a lot cheaper if you're here on the West Coast. I love talking about this sort of stuff. I love also talking to other food people. So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Just Tyler at bigbluffranch.com. And reach out. Let's chat.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's simple. I like talking about this stuff. I would love to do a live episode. Man, if people gave me live questions, that would be dangerous. We would be on there forever.
Yeah, I think that it would be really fun. Yeah, stay tuned for that, you guys. Thank you again, Tyler. I think, you've provided a lot of food for thought here. We've got multiple sort of like next conversation topics like already queued up, which I think is really great. I think challenging what's happening in the industry is necessary, and exposing it, talking about it is necessary. It's part of the process of moving things forward in a direction that's meaningful for both people and the planet. So thank you for what you do. Thanks for hanging out with me for over an hour today, and I'll see you soon.
Not a problem. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you. Stay tuned inside the Good Food CFO community and through our newsletter to find out when Tyler might join us for a live event. As always, I want to thank you for joining us here today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It's the #1 way to help more good food founders find the show. I'll be back with a brand new episode in 2 weeks.